If you love dim sum, you probably love肠粉or肠粉, also known as rice noodle rolls. And I get it. A dim sum feast would not be complete without肠粉, but when it comes to making them at home, that's where things get tricky. You see, there are two traditional ways to make rice noodle rolls. First, there's the OG method, where a wet cloth is being placed over a perforated steaming plate, a rice flour batter is then spread over the cloth, and the fillings are placed on top. After a few minutes of steaming, the cloth is then flipped over onto a greased surface, where a skillful chef rolls and chops it up for you. As you can imagine, not exactly a home-friendly recipe. Now, there is a second method which is a bit easier. It involves greasing a very large sheet pan, then spreading the rice batter on top of that, usually but not always followed by a quickly scrambled egg, then followed by the fillings. Everything is placed into a large steamer, and after a few minutes in there, the cooked noodle is then being scraped off rather than rolled and moved to a serving plate. Not that much easier for home cooks if you ask me. I mean, people do make肠粉at home, but it usually involves getting the largest steamer you could reasonably find for home use, which is still only able to hold a pretty small steaming pan inside, and the whole process is kind of doable, but if you ask me, it sort of takes the fun out of肠粉. Okay, I'm sorry for that one. Anyway, what this whole thing made me think is that there must be a better way to make rice noodle rolls at home. And guess what? I think I found it. It's not gonna be 100%, and I know any Cantonese grandma would probably whoop my ass. But if you're willing to think outside the box, I think it gets you close enough in just a fraction of the time and effort needed to follow a more traditional approach. And for me, that's the type of recipe I love the most. In fact, I may or may not have a whole book of those to share with you, but hold on, more on that at the end of the video. First, let's make some rice noodle rolls. For that, we're gonna start with the batter. The simplest way is to get rice flour from your local Asian grocery store. It's gonna make up the bulk of our batter, but we're also mixing in a little tapioca starch for the right texture. Add a pinch of salt to give it flavor and a spoonful of oil, which helps with the cooking process. Add plenty of water, mix very well, and let it rest for 30 minutes if you have the time, but you're pretty much good to go as it is. That batter would get you totally acceptable results in my world anyway. There are even pre-made肠粉mixtures you could just buy and speed things up even more, but if you're willing to take a little bit more time, there is one trick that will dramatically increase the flavor of your肠粉noodle. From Chinese Cooking Demystified, I learned that aged rice is the secret to perfect肠粉in China. And the one type of aged rice I'm able to find near me is basmati. You can wash some of that, soak it overnight, which will fully hydrate it, and that is important for the next step, which is blending the soaked rice in a food processor with water for about 3 to 5 minutes, or until it is as fine as it's gonna get. Now we can add a little bit of tapioca, salt, and oil for texture and flavor optimization, and after one final shake, this is good to go. By the way, this smoothie cup lid with a small cover I can pop on and off quickly is absolutely perfect for this recipe. You'll see in a second. First, let's take care of our fillings. Shrimp are an absolute classic. I bought some frozen ones, which I simply defrosted for about half an hour. You also want to chop some green onions, optionally some cilantro as well for that delicious soapy kick. And you know what? We can also make something like a quick dumpling filling, because the truth is肠粉is also starting to become somewhat of a shortcut dumpling in my head. You can put anything you want in a肠粉, really. And last but not least, we need to prep one more ingredient, which is probably the one thing that makes my rice noodle roll recipe work, and that's beaten eggs with a small splash of water. So remember how the scraping method used a little bit of egg in the whole mixture? Well, I think that's not just a filling. I think it's there to kind of hold the entire roll together. And that's gonna come in super handy, especially if, like me, you wanna cook your rice noodle more like a crepe in a pan and not in a steamer, which I promise is not as absurd as it sounds. So it all starts with a non-stick pan, which you preheat over medium heat. You want it very warm but not hot before you brush it lightly with a bit of oil. Now, before every rice noodle roll you make, you want to grab your batter and give it one quick good shake to make sure everything is mixed evenly. This is important, so don't skip it. Then you want to measure out enough batter for one changfan. The diameter of my pan's cooking surface is 20 centimeters and 50 mils was the perfect amount of batter in my opinion. You want to pour that batter into the pan and immediately start spreading it around. But instead of swirling as you would with a crepe, try to shimmy it around while keeping the pan more or less flat instead. After a few seconds, your batter will have firmed up, which is when you want to add 2 to 3 tablespoons of egg mixture in the middle, and this time you can shimmy and swirl as needed. But we're not going to wait long. Instead, we're beginning to add our fillings to the center of our changfan in one line. I always go for some greens first, and then I add 4 of my shrimp with some space between them. Now you can cover your pan with a lid and steam everything for just about 2 minutes. Once time is up, we can start rolling. Slowly lift one side of the pancake with a spatula and carefully use your fingers to assist yourself while you fold the rice noodle all the way over the center. Repeat from the other side, take your time if needed, and just be sure not to burn yourself. Give the roll about 10 seconds to stick together, then carefully flip it over and cook for another 20 seconds or so. You might have a little flap sticking out at this point, which you can just fold over. It should stick to the roll. Finally, align your folded roll on the pan and just slide it out onto a lightly greased plate. Let's try this again, but this time with our pork dumpling filling. Lightly grease the pan, shake your batter, add 50 mils of batter to the pan, shimmy it around until it's firm, add some egg mixture, spread that around as well, sprinkle with cilantro and spring onions. This time we're adding 4 very small dollops of our pork filling, put the lid on, steam for 2 minutes, then open and fold both sides into the center. Flip, seal, carefully slide it out onto a plate, and there you have your beautiful, delicious changfan. I like to serve them with some blanched choy sum on the side. For the sauce, I simply dissolved some sugar in soy sauce, which immediately gives it a Cantonese style touch. Pour some of that over your changfan and sprinkle with extra spring onions and toasted sesame seeds before digging in. Look, I know this recipe is more of a fun shortcut, but as long as it tastes good, why not? That is a mindset I like to guide all the recipes I create, and you know what? There's a whole book full of them, which I can finally announce is coming out. It's called Kitchen Passport, and it took me almost a year to make it happen. Inside you're gonna find almost 100 recipes, mostly inspired by my food travels, but also by my food history deep dives. There are also tons of beautiful pictures me and the team took right here in the studio, and I'm even sharing a couple of essays which are about the food memories that shaped me. I am very excited to hear what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.